Ah yes, the Pulse Crystal Implant, the other laser implant that is largely overshadowed by the focused crystal. This can provide much more consistent damage buffs, but at a huge cost that requires the player to design their ship's fittings all around it. But first, don't forget to hit that special button, you know the one. Oh, and in this video I'll be sure to include some footage of the implant in use. I can't promise to include footage of other future implants, other than the ones that I personally own, but otherwise going forwards I'll include it where I can. Now, unlike the previous laser implant, the Pulse Crystal doesn't get as much attention in the limelight. It doesn't contribute much in the popular dormant realm, and specifically the one that can be completed in under 5 minutes. And long-range glass cannon ratting fits will struggle to make this implant work for them. I'm speaking from experience here, I did try earlier on in the year. But it most definitely has its place in the game. What the Pulse Crystal does when it's activated is boost the laser damage output at the cost of an extra 50% capacitor consumption on the laser's activation cost. That means that your lasers are consuming 2.5 times their usual capacitor consumption. Yeah, that is 2.5 times, that's not a mistake. I originally made the mistake of thinking it was only 1.5 times from misreading and misunderstanding the description, which I guess is why tutorials like this exist. So anyways, what about that bonus damage rewarded by the implant itself? Well, that's where things get a tad interesting. Not only does the damage scale with the level of the implant, but it also scales with the ship's total capacitor levels, with the highest possible damage boost being 75% at level 45. That's right, not only do you need to avoid running out of capacitor as a result of running this implant, but you need to keep this capacitor level as high as possible to maintain that high damage output. That means capacitor rigs, batteries, skills, nanocore attributes, Nosferatos, whichever works the best for your current situation. These all need to be considered to support this implant. Do note, however, that this implant uses an active ability, so you can merely press the button to disable it whenever the capacitor levels get dangerously low, just to give you a chance to recharge again. So whilst we're talking about a low capacitor, let's have a look at the level 15 abilities and how they help us overcome this obstacle. First up, we have the Smart Battery passive skill. If at any point your capacitor drops below 32% whilst the lasers are enabled, the recharge for your capacitor is reduced by 15%, that's the recharge time, enabling a much faster capacitor recharge speed. Note that this will only assist you in recovering your capacitor back up to 32% before it disables once again. But if you're in a sticky situation with capacitor leaking from all over the place, this can be all some players need to completely avoid themselves from capping out. But what about the other level 15 passive skill? Well, reabsorption achieves a similar goal, but in a slightly different way that can make it useful to non-laser ships. Once again, it reduces the capacitor recharge time by 15%, but this time its trigger is where the implant's ability is disabled. That's right, you don't even need to be running lasers. All you have to do is activate and then deactivate the implant to instantly get a 15% reduction in the capacitor recharge time. If you're flying a Logi ship in fleets and have this implant available and not the proper Logi implant for the ship that you are flying, then at the very least this can help you with keeping that capacitor alive by giving you that bonus 15% recharge by just turning it on and off again. And it helps you keep your fleet mates alive. It is a genuine use for it. Otherwise, when you're using it on a laser ship, it will simply just help with recovering that capacitor when you are forced to disable the crystal due to capacitor issues. Me personally, I prefer not to have to shut down the crystal, so I go for the previous option. So next up, all the way up at level 30, we have Shield Neutralizer. This passive skill is quite possibly the simplest passive skill I've covered so far in these videos. So much so that I'm already padding out this part of the video. So yes, that's a solid 10% damage bonus to your lasers, regardless of whether or not the implant's ability is actually active. It's a solid choice and one that I have personally chosen to stick with at this level. But what about the other option? Well, let's click on it, and yeah, high power is another capacitor skill, as it helps further reduce the capacitor burden by 100%. That means that your lasers are now only drawing an additional 50% instead of an additional 150%, so you're now only drawing 1.5 times the usual capacitor amount. Remember that we're not simply talking about capacitor stability here. We want to get as much of our capacitor as we can. We want to get it as high as possible if we want to get the highest possible damage output. So this effectively competes with the previous option because having a lower capacitor usage also means a higher DPS. So it's going to be situational as to which one of these actually yields the better DPS. So why do I personally run the raw damage Shield Neutralizer? Well, shortly after levelling this implant all the way up to level 30 at the start of this year, I tried out both options in PvE with 3 large NOS for R2s on my Balgorn. Yeah, no, I used 3, but it was in high sec at the time, and because of the war, it wasn't really an issue. You know, no one was going to come in and gank me, and I didn't need an extra web or a warp scrambler or disruptor. I could spare the extra slot for a Nosferatu. And I found that if you are able to replenish that lost capacitor fast enough and keep it in the 80% range, then the consumption rate doesn't really matter all that much, and the raw damage just proved to be, through the ticks that is, a much more superior option, especially considering it remains active even when the implant is disabled. But all of that said, if you cannot maintain a healthy capacitor and you are constantly going to be dipping below 50% and you don't want to have to shut down the implant yourself, then high power will be the choice for you, just to save yourself from running out of capacitor. So yeah, moving on to level 45. I'm getting good at pressing the buttons on the screen at the right time, by the way. I'm getting a bit proud of myself there. So level 45, let's not go too far off track there. We're back into the territory of the unknown for me. We have the active skill Reverse Power. This bad boy of a skill converts 15% of your maximum shields into 10%, I nearly said 15 there, 10% of your capacitor. That being maximum shields, so you can't cheese it with temporary shield modules. This happens every 10 seconds and represents quite a serious capacitor boost. So when researching for this implant, for this video, I came across a neat little trick that I'll try to show up on screen right now. I am kind of unable to confirm this due to the nature of me not having it at level 45, but assuming you're not planning on actually taking any shield damage, so you're inside a nightmare bubble for example, you can get constant free capacitor out of this skill, provided of course that your shield booster recovers at least 15% of your shields and at a cost of less than 10% of your capacitor. At a glance, it certainly sounds achievable if you want to select the right ship hull and general units to make this happen. Personally, I've not gone through the numbers of trying to make this happen because of course I don't even have the implant at level 45, so it'd be rather difficult for me to demonstrate. So let's talk about what this implant does then, and where it fits. As I alluded to at the start of the video, it certainly doesn't fit into solo, long-ranged glass cannon ratting like the focus crystal. This is because in order to maintain that capacitor level, and thus the damage boost, you need to be able to replenish that capacitor really quickly. And the most effective method of doing so that I've found is through the use of Nosferatus. Not your capacitor control circuits or capacitor based low slots. Nosferatus. And Nosferatus dictate the range at which you can fight, and of course the optimal range. You can increase or decrease this accordingly with general units, but you're still mostly confined to brawling. And because Nosferatus are the most powerful way of sustaining this capacitor level, we are best looking at ship hulls that provide bonuses towards these, and this quickly leads me towards the Blood Raider ship line, such as the Balgorn. Not only do these take significantly more capacitor from the target when equipped to these ships, furthering the cause of feeding the Pulse Crystal, but the Nosferatus essentially become neutralizers when used on other players, thanks to the removal of the overload penalty, which is commonly found on Blood Raider ships. As such, I always run the Pulse Crystal when I'm flying Blood Raider ships, so if you're looking to engage in close ranged ratting or PvP, I highly recommend pairing these with Blood Raider ships. And this is the point of the video whereby we look at the options available for obtaining the implant in-game. I personally purchased my golden Pulse Crystal off of the in-game market for around, 3 billion-isk? It was a long time ago when I purchased that implant for 3 billion-isk. Nowadays it's risen to around 20 billion, so let's have a look at where we can get it in Dormant Realms, as this would seem the more reasonable approach for most. Now, it does drop in the random boxes obtained from completing Lore of the Deep, and it's not available as a guaranteed first time completion in any of the Dormant Realms. Unfortunately for many, Lore of the Deep is a capital Dormant Realm. If you don't already have a capital ship and don't plan on getting one, then yeah, this implant is best purchased off the in-game market, as even its golden form sells for less than a fully fitted capital ship. And yeah, so that is the Pulse Crystal up and dressed. What implant would you like me to... There, I messed that a little bit up. I was doing so well with this video. That would be the only bit I'd have to cut, but I'm leaving that bit in. Let's try that bit again. So yeah, that's the Pulse Crystal up and dressed. What implant would you like to see me cover in the next implant tutorial? There we go, I did that bit. There are plenty of other implants to choose from, and I'm quite enjoying having to decipher the abilities of some of these that I can't personally test. Yeah, I know the Pulse Crystal is a bit of a cheat in this case, but hey ho. And of course, if you have any further questions regarding this implant, feel free to post them in the comments section below. Until the next video, guys, fly casual.